All right, everyone. Welcome. So I'm just going to give it a couple of seconds here so we can wait for a few people to sign in. All right, it looks like we have some people watching. So good afternoon and thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to introduce author Michele Vig. She is also the creator of Neat Little Nest, and today she's going to talk a little bit about her book, The Guide to Holistic Decluttering, and kind of some of the ways that you can use that in your life. And I am very excited to welcome you today. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Chelsea. It's so good to be here. Well, good evening, everybody. I am so happy to be with you virtually. I am here in Minneapolis in my home. And as Chelsea mentioned, I'm Michele Vig. I'm the founder of Neat Little Nest. And I hope that we can do 3 things with our time together. I'd like to share my story and how I went from a corporate executive to decluttering expert, because there is a story in that. I would like to broaden your view of what clutter is and get you to think about how clutter might be playing a role in your life. And I hope to motivate you in whatever action it takes for you to think about taking action against that clutter. At the end of the presentation, you're going to be able I'm going to answer your questions. So throughout the presentation, and Chelsea, you can add in if I'm saying it wrong, but you can put your questions in the chat and we can look at those at the end and I will be answering those. So with that, we'll get started with the presentation. So this is me in my backyard in 1979. I've always loved this picture. I don't know if it's the way that I'm holding my hands on my hips like I mean something or mean business, or the fact that maybe my arms are 20 shades lighter than my legs. But in all seriousness, I really love this picture because it reminds me of my childhood dreams. I loved performing and wanted to be a singer-songwriter when I was a young girl. But for a variety of reasons, including the fact that my parents said that really isn't a good way to make money, I decided to pursue a career in business. I mentioned dreams in the context of clutter because I believe they're completely related. To me, your dreams are what your soul wants, but often, too often, clutter gets in the way of you reaching them. So this slideshow shows the milestones of my work life. I know that clutter can get in the way because the stories I made up in my mind about what I should do and what I shouldn't do cluttered up my mind for decades. And that mental clutter caused me to live a work-first life with stress and anxiety, the 2 most consistent companions in my life, rather than listening to my own heart and God's voice, really, to tell me what path I should be on. So after I graduated from high school in 1991, I was blessed with a wonderful opportunity to work in a variety of careers, and I received professional accolades for that work. In my 20s, I accomplished working on a high-profile campaign for the Minnesota Department of Health. In my 30s, I was leading innovation team for Buffalo Wild Wings, including many firsts for the company. And then I spent a decade at Caribou Coffee as a C-suite executive and the president in my mid-40s. The success happened to me because I was able to really dig into messes. I saw solutions and I figured out a way to help to organize my time in a way that I could finally deliver results for the company. And that's great. But what you can't see on this timeline is that I was often the first one to work in the morning and the last one to leave in the evening. You also can't see all the sacrifices that I made at my home or the friends I lost because I prioritized my work, sometimes over everything else. You can't see that during the decade I was at Caribou Coffee, I was promoted 7 times, which brought about a lot of stress and a lot of change and a ton of transition. As my roles grew, so did my stress, along with the inner voice that was getting louder and louder, telling me I was on the wrong path. My body started showing signs of fatigue, and with many, we can't really explain it, sort of health issues. I was stressed, I was anxious, and I was utterly exhausted. In addition to my work stress, like everyone, I had challenges at home as well in my personal life. At this time, at the height of my career, my youngest brother was recovering from alcohol addiction. And during his recovery, he was run over by a bobcat machine and was put in the hospital for 4 months. In those same 4 months, my mother in law and my brother in law were in hospice, and we buried them 2 weeks apart. The kind of clutter that was in my life was significant. I prayed for a way out because I just couldn't see it. My schedule and my mind were a cluttered mess. The good news is, in early 2017, my prayers were answered. I didn't know it at the time, but asked, I was laid off from Caribou Coffee. I was asked, after working there for a decade, that my services were no longer needed. And at the moment when I was told this, I was both relieved and terrified because I wasn't sure what was next. But I knew in the back of my mind that the back half of my life needed to look different than the first half. So I started asking myself, I kind of started changing the question. I started asking myself, what kind of life do you want to live? Rather than continually asking myself the question that people have been asking me as far as I could think back. Michele, what kind of job do you want to have? What kind of money do you want to make? There was so much clutter in my mind about that I couldn't really see a path forward. So what I did is I took time off in an uncluttered space with an uncluttered calendar to give me some time to think. Upon all that personal reflection, that is why I chose to found Neat Little Nests. It might seem radical, but I'd already been blogging on a blog called Neat Little Nest since 2014. I was in an executive offsite and we were digging into what we wanted to do with our lives, and this kept coming up for me. So in 2014, when I started that blog, it was testing the waters. My vision was to build a company that would help unlock people from their clutter, all types, so they can live their most desired life. Because I've seen clutter get in the way of a lot of people reaching their full potential or living the life that they want to live, just like me. So with that, I want to talk about clutter. When you guys see the word clutter and hear me say the word clutter, I imagine you're thinking of physical clutter. An overstuffed closet, maybe an overflowing junk drawer. You might even picture someone on hoarders. And those are all types of clutter. But there's also clutter is much bigger than just physical stuff. There is physical clutter for sure. We see that, we think of it the moment we hear about clutter. That is the overstuffed junk drawer. Maybe your overflowing closet. There might be things on your kitchen counter. But there's also time clutter. That's an overbooked calendar or too many commitments. And there's mental clutter. All of these types of clutter are intricately linked. One doesn't usually live without another. And when they're all three out of balance at the same time, it can really feel like chaos. The challenge is that when we live lives that are so cluttered, it's hard for us to live our most desired, true life. Because if our homes are filled with too much physical clutter, we might be less likely to ask somebody over if they needed help or if we need help. If every minute of our calendar is booked, we don't really have time or space to help someone in need or be present with our family. And if our minds are constantly running a script of unproductive or self consuming thoughts, it's really difficult for us to think and hear the voice that lives inside of us. But there's so much hope. There's so much hope because we can declutter our lives and live the life that is intended for us to live. It's the reason I wrote this book. I know that it is true. I wanted to share this whole life philosophy because I had found myself looking at people who worked on my team who were having time clutter, myself with mental clutter, other people that I knew who were struggling with physical clutter. And I saw this thread that was going in between all of them. And when you pull the thread one way, it really starts pulling at different types of clutter. There's a lot of benefits to decluttering holistically. First, you might uncover some unhealthy patterns, which is a good thing because until you actually recognize and realize that there's some unhealthy patterns, you might keep on the path of that. When you declutter holistically and looking at all these different types of clutter and really working on each of these types of clutter, you can start to align your actions toward your dreams. Another benefit is it can save you time and money. And I mean real money. I had a client who you can save a little bit of money because there's studies that have shown that people search for lost things in their home for 5 minutes for every lost thing they're trying to look for. And the study found that that equated to 2.5 days a year just looking for lost things. And usually those lost things are purchased again. And typically, as soon as you buy it, it seems it's showing up and you find it. But I had a client who saved way more than just a few dollars on something they lost. She called me over to help her declutter her basement. And I will tell you, when I first got there, I didn't even really know why they had hired me because I saw the upstairs of their home and it was beautifully decorated and no clutter at all. And when we went to the basement and we couldn't move at all, I realized what was happening. So when we spent a week's worth of time decluttering that basement, so they were able to free themselves and free that space, it saved them over $100,000 because they didn't need to move. They actually had hired me because they believed they had to move. And once we finished decluttering and finding homes for all the things they had, they stayed put. You're able to increase your focus. There have been studies done. A Princeton study mapped people's ability to focus on a task in organized and disorganized environments. And they found conclusively that when there's too much stimuli in a cluttered environment, it's difficult for your brain to focus. It's just the way that the brain works. So when you remove some of the clutter from your physical space, it allows you the ability to increase your focus in yourself and if you have children, in your children, which leads to increased peace and happiness because you're going to create space. That all sounds great. But where do you start? I recommend you start far away from your clutter. Put all your clutter to the side, all the time clutter, all the mind clutter, all the physical clutter. Just put it to the side. And take a moment, or a little bit more than that, to focus on your life's vision. Give yourself some space to think about what the vision is for your life. What do you want to see more of? What do you want to see less of? You will know which one of these types of clutter is really weighing you down the most. But it's likely they all have some sort of tie and they're all speaking to you in different ways. So, by giving yourself some space to create a vision, you're able to listen to your inside voice about how you're being called to grow and serve in new ways. That vision is what you need to get from where you are today to where you want to go in the end. Whether it is a project, a small one, a big one, or decluttering. Having a vision allows you, when you're in the murky middle, when you kind of don't want to keep going, it reminds you why you started in the first place, so you can keep the momentum and get to the end of your goal. How do you write a vision? There's so many different ways. You can grab a piece of pencil, you can grab a piece of paper and some colored pencils and just start drawing what you want your life to look like. You can cut out inspiration from a magazine. Those of you who are on this call, I've created worksheets that are my desired life, 2 worksheets that you can fill in, and you can work with the library to get those copies for you to create this vision. But just know it doesn't have to be, there's not one right way to create a vision. The only thing that I'm asking is that you do whatever works best for you. With your vision in mind, it becomes time to dig into the clutter. I recommend starting with the physical clutter because getting rid of things that no longer serve you will uncover the things that do. When you start with physical clutter, you start to open up space. I was talking about that Princeton study where a cluttered space makes it more difficult for people to think. So as you start to declutter your spaces, your brain will also have some ability to think in a more clear way. Before I talk about how to declutter your space and how to organize your space, I want to spend just a couple minutes talking about why we have so much clutter. Some of the reasons are obvious, and others we might just not have given it much thought. So I wanted to just shine a light on it. The first reason is we buy too much. Now, that's probably pretty obvious, but let's dig into that a little bit deeper and look at why. The number one reason we buy too much, especially in the United States, is because we can. We have a lot of wealth in the United States, even in the midst of a global pandemic. Average credit card, if we don't have the wealth ourselves, we will use credit cards to buy the things we want with average credit card debt over $9,000. We also buy too much because marketing and advertising is very effective. We might not think or give enough credit to the fact that we are influenced through marketing. And that influence, they are after spending 20 years in marketing myself, they are marketing directly to you based on what they believe will make you take action to buy what they have. We also buy too much because sometimes we're searching for happiness in stuff. There's something that's in us that's not feeling quite right, and we are searching for stuff to fill that hole. And finally, we might just be trying to keep up with the Joneses. We might not feel adequate. We might not have a clear picture of what we want our lives to be. And if we don't quite have a clear picture of what we want our lives to be, we're going to look to the Joneses next door and try to create the life that they have. The second big reason is we keep too much. And there are a few reasons for this too. The first is attachment. We get attached to things very quickly. A study was done on people who got a free koozie from a ball game. And after the ball game, they were trying to get them to give the koozie back. And even in that short amount of time, people were like, but this is mine. This is my koozie. Mine. Hear it from little kids all the time when they're young. Mine. So we attach to things very quickly. Often the reason we attach to things is because that is something that we as a society have been trained to do. It's things we own. People are consistently told ownership, ownership. The second reason is we might keep too much simply out of fear. It could be fear that we might need it someday. A mindset that's more built on scarcity than it is on abundance. We might have had a past experience where we did get rid of something and then we needed it, and we sort of get in this cycle of beating ourselves up, and we shouldn't have done that. And the last reason is guilt. A lot of times we keep too much out of guilt. I encounter this a lot as a professional organizer with my clients. Probably the number one phrase I hear working with them is my mother-in-law gave me that. And they say this because they're afraid to even though they don't like the item they were given, it doesn't provide them any service, they're not going to use it. They keep it because they would rather keep a room full of things they don't like than actually share their true self and just say thank you with gratitude and move. And it just what didn't fit for them to have that conversation. The grip of physical clutter can be difficult to understand until we kind of look at the science behind it. So clutter triggers your fight or flight response, which means it releases cortisol. Cortisol, as you probably know, is a stress hormone. When you are living in a perpetual state of clutter, you're consistently releasing that cortisol, that stress hormone, and it puts you in a state of chronic stress. The problem is our bodies were not designed to be in a state of chronic stress. And chronic stress has real side effects that can lead to depression, anxiety, and more. And if this wasn't enough to make matters worse, at least for women, there was a study done by the UCLA Centers for Everyday Life, and they found that clutter affects women more than it does men. It affects them very differently. And I've seen this come true in the clients that I serve. They found that there was a distinct link for women for the amount of clutter in their homes and their cortisol levels. If the amount of clutter in their homes was high, their cortisol levels were also high, much higher than their male counterparts. I've seen this happen, and I say this to the people that I speak with all the time. If you are on this presentation and you are a man and you understand, and it doesn't affect you in the same way that it may your partner or your wife, consider that there are real feelings behind when someone says this clutter is making me anxious. That is real. And to work to ways together to actually make changes so that that person can feel they're living in a space they enjoy. Now, before we get to decluttering 101 and organizing 101, I really need to make sure everyone is clear about the difference, because a lot of times these phrases get mixed up. Decluttering is making decisions on what you want to keep, while organizing is making decisions on where you want items to live. The reason it's important is because often I hear clients and people who are frustrated and overwhelmed because they haven't been able to declutter and organize their space, because they start to declutter their clothes, let's say. So they go in their closet and they start to declutter their clothes, and what happens is halfway through they start to organize them, and then they actually start to clean the closet, and they're not finished decluttering, and then they run out of time and they're overwhelmed and they give up. So if you think about decluttering and organizing as two separate events, you're going to be more successful to actually reach the goal of decluttering your home and then organizing your home. Some of my clients have a decluttering problem. They have too much stuff and they need to get rid of it. I have other clients who do not have an abundance of things, but they really have to get systems created in their home, organizing so they can live in a better way. Which is why I always recommend to declutter first, take a rest, and then organize. And the reason I say to declutter first and then organize is because you're going to save yourself time and you're going to save yourself money. You have to go through the things in your house, which is decluttering, deciding what you want to keep and what no longer serves you, because then you'll be able to look at your space in a new way and create system and buy whatever bins or boxes or things that you need for just what it is that you kept, rather than trying to organize everything and then sort of trying to go through it. Declutter first, give yourself a rest, and then organize. So I'm going to walk you through decluttering tips, decluttering 101, I'm going to call it. First tip is to declutter by category rather than location. When you declutter, I would say most people that I meet, when they've decluttered in the past, they've decluttered by location. They'll say, I'm going to go declutter my bedroom. I'm going to declutter my kitchen. I'm going to declutter my storage room. If you're decluttering for the first time your entire home, and you're organizing for the first time your entire home, it's really difficult to do it room by room because you don't have a clear picture of all the things that are similar that might live throughout your house. You might have scissors in 5 spots. There might be lots of different things that are many different spots, electronic and tech and cleaning products. There's just so many things that are going to be throughout your house. And if you're looking at it room by room, you're not going to actually pause to say, is this how much of this I want? So how much do I want? And then where do I want it to live? It also, when you declutter by category, it allows you to compare and contrast. So the picture here that you see is the category of clothing, all pulled out and put onto a bed in subcategories around the bed. Then you can go through each of the categories, declutter it, go into the closet, clean it out, and then put it back and organize it. This way you're able to compare. When you put all of your t-shirts together, you might see that you have 7 black t-shirts. You wouldn't see that if you're just sort of not putting like things with like when you're decluttering. And while it is important to declutter by category versus location, make sure that you're saving those sentimental items for last. Because you really want to build up your ability and your decision-making process as you declutter. When you build up your ability to make decisions on what you want to keep, when you get to things that are very sentimental, you're going to, at that point, have a clearer picture of what is important and what you want to keep in your life. And if you're looking for a category checklist, you can get a free decluttering checklist at neatlittle.nest.com. You can visit the site, a pop-up will show up, and you can get that checklist. It has the categories in the order of the KonMari or decluttering process, which I have been certified as a KonMari decluttering expert. And a special note on sentimental items: don't be tough on yourself that it has to be a one and done sort of thing. I really haven't ever seen this happen. I've seen people need to go through sentimental items often more than once. And usually that is because in the sentimental items, there likely are items from someone who may have passed. And when there are those types of items, it just takes time for you to work through the emotions of what that means to you. So give yourself some space and time to do that. Another really important rule for decluttering 101 is focus your mind on what you want to keep. Sometimes I've seen it with my clients, I've seen it with my kids. I've heard it a lot when I'm talking to people. They're worried about that they have to get rid of stuff. And you will. It's very likely that you will get rid of some things when you're decluttering, but that's not the mindset that you should go in with. Because when you go in with the mindset of what am I going to get rid of? I'm just going to pick out what I don't like. Think of decluttering as an exercise in curating what you love. So you're looking at your things with a eye toward what you want to keep and what you love. I recommend people use two filters for that. One is, does it bring you joy? Do you love it? Sometimes a very practical item might not bring us joy. So the second filter is, does it serve a very functional, does it provide you a service that serves you? If the answer to it is yes, it brings me joy, and yes, it provides me service, or yes, I just love it, keep it. And then go through all of your items with that in mind, focusing on what you want to keep. The one thing that I say when people are decluttering is make a choice. Choose yes or choose no. Either keep it with vigor or discard it with gratitude. You don't need to have all these things in the maybe category. If you're on the fence, even in a decluttering session with clothes, if you're on the fence, put a couple in a maybe pile while you're going through the other items. But then at the end of the session for clothes, make a decision and if you want to keep it, if you're on the fence, then make the decision a joyful yes. And if you're having a hard time with that, it's likely because it's supposed to be a gratitude no. And last but really not least for Decluttering 101 is finish decluttering your entire home, all the categories. When you go through all of your things and you look at it with what provides you with joy and what provides you with service, you will learn so much about yourself, so much about how you've been spending your money, so much about what actually leads you to bring sense of joy and appreciation and what you're looking for. That is why decluttering your home is so important first, because as you open up space in your mind, in your home, you're going to open up space in your mind. Now, as we move on to organizing 101, which is the next phase once you finish decluttering, it's really important to remember that organizing isn't the goal. Simplifying your life is the goal. I know with all of the organizing shows and all the beautiful products you can buy for organizing, and even myself as a person who loves a beautifully organized space, the beautifully organized space is to serve a purpose to help you simplify your life. So you're spending less time looking for things and spending more time enjoying your life. That is the reason to do the decluttering and organizing. If you want to make it look beautiful, that's just an added benefit when you're finished. So the golden rule of organizing is assign a home for everything. Literally everything. When you don't assign a home, it's going to end up jammed in a junk drawer, sitting on a counter. It will. It always does. Store active items in active spaces. Meaning, if you're going to have things in the kitchen that you use all the time, store them in the kitchen. And store storage items in storage spaces. I see this often where my clients will have things in an active space that they won't be using for years. Get those items out of the active space so you can store those active items in close proximity to use. You want your spatulas close to the stove in a kitchen. You want your plates close to the dishwasher. You want your forks and knives and spoons close to the dishwasher. Those are the types of things and those are the systems that I'm talking about. And when organizers organize a space, they're thinking about so that you actually can use your space in a way that is going to make your life simplified. Because you really want to make sure that simplifying your life is part of what you get out of it. And try keeping those counters clear. Why? It's not just for looks. Keeping your counters clear allows you to clean things easier. Sometimes we think, well, I'll just put it away later. Don't. Put it away now. Store kids and pets item with care. Think about where you're storing pet items so that if they can get at them, they're supposed to be able to get at them. Same thing with children's items. Store like items with like. Storing like items with like is putting, like in a closet, like this example is, yes, we're going to put all tops together, shirts together, but even think one level deeper than that. So in that subcategory of shirts, so we've got clothes, they're in the closet, shirts, they're together. Inside of the shirts, put all the collared shirts together, all the short sleeves together, all the long sleeves together. The reason to do this, it makes it easier for you to pull together an outfit quickly, makes it easy for you to see how much of a category, subcategory you have. You might have too many of one thing that you didn't even realize until you put like items with like. Tip number 3 is to decant wherever possible. Decanting is taking things out of their original packaging and putting it into a different type of container. Doing this takes up a lot less space. It also takes a lot less packaging. It also saves you time in the long run. So imagine you've just gotten home from the grocery store. You're able to, like this picture from my client's pantry, when you take all the bars out and you decant them when you come home from the grocery store and you take all the snacks out and you put your rice in the rice container, all that packaging that you have, instead of having to be getting rid of it throughout the week, or if you have children, they're just going to leave that box in the cupboard, so you actually don't even know it's empty. You do one swoop of recycling after you do your grocery shopping, and that's it. And so your pantry and your kitchen products are set for you to use throughout the week, and it's a lot quicker for the family. Last but not least, use labels. Labels are wayfinding for everybody in the space. And I've had clients who live alone. I had one client in particular who said, I don't need labels. I live alone. I mean, this is not important. And we finished her space, and I said, I know that you said you don't need labels. Why don't you just give it a couple of days? She'd also never had a space with a system that was clear where everything went. And once she was in that space for 2 days, I called her back and I said, so I want to talk about those labels. How are you doing with those? Is your system of not having a label working? She goes, you're absolutely right. It's making me think too hard. I have to think too hard about where things go. Now imagine you're in a space. This is a single person who created the system with me. Now imagine you're a person who has a household, and mom is typically the person having to put all the stuff away. And if the kids aren't putting it away, it's hard to hold them accountable to do so when they don't know where it actually goes. So use labels. We're going to shift gears into time clutter. This is what time clutter sounds like. I'm sure that most of you have said one of these things once or twice. There's just too much to do. I'm always behind. I'm so busy. I mean, I've said all these, and it's not fun. It's not fun when you feel that pressure, that time is not on your side. But the good news is that you can teach yourself to no longer be in a perpetual state of busy. It's absolutely true. Because once you realize that you alone decide how to spend your time, you open up a new world of possibility. Let's let that sink in just for a second. You alone decide how you spend your time. Now, sometimes we think other people are driving our calendars. It's just not true. We have a choice, and we always have the choice to make changes to our life. It's within us to do so. We might have to use our voice. We might have to create more boundaries. Let's talk about why there's so much time clutter. There's a lot of reason for this, but I'm going to touch on two big ones: poor planning and poor boundaries. Poor planning sounds like not planning ahead, not scheduling enough time. So you might know it's going to take you this long, but you kind of try to crunch it into a time frame that fits your schedule rather than fitting your schedule to the tasks you need to do. You might have lack of tools or routines to stay on track. You might have given yourself enough time and you just don't have other tools that can help you stay on track. You might have too many priorities. You might not be scheduling enough rest. And if you're not scheduling enough rest in your planning, you're not going to have enough time to rejuvenate for the rest of the things that you need to do. Poor boundaries might show up as saying yes too quickly when someone asks you to do something. It could be saying what yes when you mean no. I know we're all guilty of that. I know I am for sure. You might be putting other people's priorities over your own. You might be putting those first. And when you do that over time without speaking your truth, it can lead to resentment. You might have unclear priorities, or you might be ignoring the warning signs that you don't even have any boundaries at all. You're just letting people take your time without you having a say in it. So when you start to declutter your day, start to think about what you give your time to and why. And if when you're thinking about what you give your time to and why doesn't feel good, it doesn't align with what you had hoped for yourself, then start to think about and write down where you would prefer to spend your time. Who are you with? How much are you working? How much are you resting? What are you doing for fun? Are you doing anything for fun? When we get our minds clear on what we're looking for to spend our time, we're going to be able to declutter that time and make it come to life. We have to prioritize what's coming at us. I know this can be difficult, especially with this always on, everything's an emergency culture we live in today with 24-hour news and must do right now um, underlying culture. Part of the problem is our society. Did you guys know that for over 500 years, priority was the word? There was no S on the end. We put an S on the end so we didn't have to choose. Instead of having a priority, we have multiple priorities. It's just too difficult. We have to choose what's our priority. So a tool I've used for many years is called the Eisenhower Matrix. And while I don't have the time to teach you this in depth, I am going to walk you through an overview of how it works and share why it's important for you to evaluate all the things that are coming at you. In the upper left quadrant of this matrix, these are where you would put things that are important but not urgent. Because you can see along the top is level of urgency and along the side is level of importance. So in this upper left quadrant, crises, pressing problems, close deadlines, some of the calls and the emails we get, those are urgent and important. It's likely where we spend a lot of our time. The second quadrant is important, but it's not urgent. Planning and preparation, thinking time, relationship building, planning time to rest. This is the quadrant where we, by spending more of our time in this quadrant, we'll be living out the life that we intend. but it requires us to take action to do so. The third quadrant is not important and it's not urgent. Or it is urgent. It's other people's priorities. It's mom's priorities. It might be your dad's priorities. It might be your spouse's priorities. It might be your boss's priorities. It may be your kids' priorities, but they're not your priorities. Might be interruptions. It might be some calls and emails. We can often get pulled from Q1 to Q3, working on all of these urgent tasks, leaving us no time to go up to the quadrant 2. And the fourth quadrant is not important and it's not urgent. It's busy work, it's escape activities, it's procrastination activities, and oftentimes the reason we end up in Q4 is because we're tired and we are feeling unbalanced and our time is cluttered and we feel it's our only ability to give ourselves some rest. When you write out the tasks that when you just simply draw, these 2 lines on a piece of paper is all you need to do this matrix. And when you put the tasks that you have into these buckets, it'll all of a sudden give you a picture of where you're spending, what you have to do and where you're giving your time to. You can mark it with how long it will take you to actually do each one of the tasks so you can start to see how it looks for you to actually get these done. Once you have a clearer picture of everything you need to do and what quadrant it is, you can start planning out your days. And it's really important to know you have to choose what you're going to do. And I just need to remind you, just because it needs to be done doesn't mean it needs to be done by you. So get curious about what you say yes to and if you need to do it now. Here's some questions to ask yourself. Does it need to be done today? Oftentimes it doesn't. Often we just need to ask the people who are asking us to get this done if we can have more time. Does it need to be done by me? Sometimes if you're a perfectionist, you might think that you're the only one who can do a task. You're the only one who can get it done right. But the reality is, what is it costing you? How much time are you giving up because you have to do everything? And does it not need to be done at all? Maybe you're thinking it's a priority, but if you really take some space and really look at the quadrant and really look at what's in Q1 and Q3, that's keeping you away from Q2, the really important but not urgent stuff. You might say, actually, it doesn't need to be done. What would happen if I just didn't do it? And finally, if you don't have a planner, I really encourage you to find a planner that works for you. A couple tips: the rule of one, especially now in our digital age. Some people have a lot of they're trying new types of planners and calendars. If you have determined that a digital calendar works for you and everything you can do digitally, that's great. What I'm finding with a lot of my clients is that a digital calendar alone is not able to get all they need. So I talk about the rule of one. Instead of having a planner that you have on your phone, a planner on your notebook, another planner for journaling, another one for gratitude. Try to think about the rule of one. Is there one system? Is there one place where you can keep all the tasks sort of together so you can continually be evaluating them rather than having bits and pieces all over? Sticky notes, notebooks, things in your notes in your phone. What is a way that you can get them all together to help you focus on what you need to get done? And when you're trying to find a planner that works for you, give it time and practice. Trying test runs is important. I know it took me a while to find a planner that I really could have that worked for me. I have found that a physical planner is what works for me best. I do have a digital calendar, and I also have that information in my physical planner because I know I can always have access to it at any time. And once you have a planner that works for you, establish some routines that you're actually taking the time to plan out your day. when you're taking the time to use your planner is when it actually is going to bring you the use you need. Last, but certainly not least, probably the most important of these three is mental clutter. I love this quote. When we throw out physical clutter, we clear our minds. And when we throw out mental clutter, we clear our souls. We hold on to a lot in our minds. Mind clutter is probably the sneakiest of all the different types of clutter because we can't see it. If you imagine this being a tree, physical clutter and time clutter, they're at the top. You can kind of see it. You can definitely see physical clutter if your home or your car or your workspace is cluttered up. And you can usually see time clutter. You can see other people who have time clutter. They might be walking fast, getting from meeting to meeting. They might be cutting you short when they're talking to you because they don't have time to give you the time you need. These things you can see. Mental clutter is usually at the root of these other two types of clutter. Our minds are constantly on. They're constantly thinking. That's one of the reasons we have mental clutter is because our minds are always on. And we haven't had a lot of practice in how we can sort of work through that mental clutter. There's a lot of different reasons for why we have so much mental clutter. Not to mention the least of which is that our minds are always on, and we are now in a culture of 24/7 information coming at us from our phones and our computers and our family and our TVs and all these digital devices that we just going to take a second to look at, and we're 25 minutes later, we don't know where the time has gone. Mental clutter can be triggered by a lot of different things. Current events, we live in old trauma, guilt, fear, and worry. Those are the three biggest. Guilt, fear, and worry are the three biggest drivers of mental clutter. We might have too many priorities. We might have too many thoughts. So we have to use the tools available to ourselves to practice how we can decrease this mental clutter. And it will be a lifelong practice because we are beings that have a mind that is consistently on. So some things you can do for find a mantra. It's just a word or phrase. It doesn't have to be too big of a deal. I know for me, I use the word focus. Sometimes when I find myself off track, I'm like, just focus, get back on track, just focus. Um, Second is keep a journal. If you can make that a gratitude journal, even better. Seeking gratitude daily is proven to lift your ability to feel things differently and have the mental clarity come to you. You can meditate. If you don't like to meditate, if it's a little bit too much for you, just breathe. Just sit down, have some deep breaths. And by all means, if you are suffering from a lot of mental clutter, that could be because of the other two pieces of clutter. Take the time you need to just take some time. Just remove yourself and take space. There's three really, I want to walk you through these different types of mental clutter before I open it up for questions. And the first one is, I hear about this one a lot. My mind is rushing. It's really hard for me to focus. I'm going from one idea to the next. I can't really keep a thought that seems linear. If this sounds like you, or if this happens to you often, here are some things you can do in the moment to help you sort of counteract this clutter. One, you can stop multitasking and you can do one thing at a time. Single tasking is proven to help you focus. So if you have 10 things you need to get done, instead of having different screens open and trying to do all these at once, just Give yourself, you can time block 10 minutes a piece and focus, focus, focus on doing one thing at a time. If you've never tried single tasking, I really encourage you to do it. You're going to get a lot more done than you suspect because your mind and your body and everything is going to be focused at getting that done. If you have too much stuff around you that's giving you, taking you off task, turn it off. Electronics, TV, even too much light, whatever those things are, you can turn it down, turn it off. If your mind is really in a place where it's just too much going on and it's rushing, you have to stop and do less. You've got to turn the volume of what you're doing down and breathe. Our breath is one of the most powerful tools we have to bring ourselves back to equilibrium, especially with our mind clutter. So, negative Nelly, this is when we really tend to dwell on things that are really negative. That negativity might be old memories of something negative that we tend to stick on. Psychologists say that we're more likely to, hang on to things that are negative for longer. It's called a negativity bias. So it's very normal that we do that. But if you are finding yourself and the voice inside your mind is negative about yourself. So if the negativeness is about being an inner critic to yourself, you really need to find your compassionate voice. And what that looks like is talking to yourself in the way that you would talk to your friend. Because when you talk to yourself in a way that you would talk to your friend, you're going to be much more compassionate, usually, than the way that we talk to ourselves. We can be our own worst critic. Now, if that negativeness is about external or other people, and you're really in a place, I call it the judger pit, and you're consistently negative about other people around you, consider forgiveness. Be quick to forgive. Research supports that forgiveness can have significant health benefits. Reduce depression, reduce anxiety, because we're not dwelling on this other person's actions. We're taking care of our own reaction to whatever the stimuli is. And again, breathe. If you're finding yourself really negative on yourself or negative about something else, take the time to just breathe. Breath work always is important with mental clutter. It helps calm down the brain and allows your body to calm down. And if you're not one to celebrate, start celebrating more. When you celebrate more, you tend to create more lasting memories for those celebrations. And then those lasting memories become what you cling onto in your mind rather than continually clinging on to negative things. So celebrate more if you're finding yourself in this place with your mind clutter. And the last, I don't know anyone who hasn't felt this at times, is maybe your mental clutter is caused by just having to make too many decisions over and over. Because even making small decisions can really wear you down over time. Number one thing to do when you feel like have just made too many decisions is just take a break. Take a break from making the decisions. Some other things you can do is set some limits. You can set limits by having a timer on your phone to make a decision. I'm going to make this decision I'm going to decide by these options in 15 minutes. If you are someone who tends to have analysis paralysis and just can't get off thinking about a decision, set a time limit. And if you're really having a hard time, eliminate some choice. There are times when we can eliminate choice that can really simplify your life. And in turn, it can simplify your decision making. Let me give you some examples of eliminating choice in your life. One, you could eliminate the choice of what you wear. You could decide that you want to wear a work uniform. Like basically a similar type of top and a similar type of bottom every single day. A work uniform, it works for a lot of people. You could eat the same thing every week. Like, so every day of the week, you have these kind of set a meal plan and you eat every Monday, you have this type of thing. Every Tuesday, you have this type of thing. Wednesday, Thursday, and so on. You could eat the same exact thing every single week, every single day if you choose. I have a daughter who has eaten the same exact lunch for 10 years. It can eliminate some choice if you feel like you're having so many decisions you need to make. And if you also find yourself in this bucket, delegate your decisions. I know there have been times for me when I've had too many decisions to make. And so I've just said to my husband, you decide. Whatever you decide, I'm on board because I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I know there was a lot in this presentation, so I'm excited that we get time to have a Q&A, but I just want to leave you with this last slide because this really is the essence of holistic decluttering. And that is, as I unclutter my life, I'm free to answer the callings of my soul. Thank you.
All right, so I don't see any questions here yet. Um, I don't know if we want to wait just a second or. All right. So while we're waiting, she did mention the handouts. So if you are interested in getting those, if you want to email the library, you can email us at infodesk@willardlibrary.org. Or if you want to come in, we do have some hard copies that you can pick up inside the library at the information desk downtown or at the Helen Warner branch. So let me just check both places here.
Sure.
Amy said, thank you for sharing. But that is the only one that I see. Oh, a lot of people are saying thank you and that it's been wonderful and you've been very helpful. So I think maybe for me, I know that I don't have any questions, but you've given me a lot to think about on my own, and I am so excited to go and try this in my own life. I called my mom during the program and I was like, Mom, what are you doing right now? And I was like, you need to come over and watch this. And they were doing something, but she was like, I'll watch it later. And I was like, I swear, this lady is talking to you. And I texted my boyfriend and I was like, this is amazing. I'm super excited. And I think a lot of other people are too. So I'm so glad that you were able to join us today.
So happy to do it. And yes, if you guys can hear this, if there's any question you have, we'll leave it open for a minute. Just type it in the chat where you are, and I'm happy to answer any of those questions.
Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you again.
Sounds good. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.